how we got here, our story. We begin with a trivia quiz. All of the answers are found somewhere inside this tent in this display. And we have a total of 40 questions. And each person can pick 10 questions, any 10 questions, and then take an index card and a pencil. And if they get all 10 questions correct, they win a free bookmark. And our story begins with the Treaty of Fort Laramie, 1851. And then up on the board here we have the Treaty of Fort Laramie, 1868, which is the one most people are familiar with, and the entire transcript of that treaty. We have a map that shows how the push westward pushed all of our tribes to the west of the Mississippi. And then we have an example of what one of the frontier towns looked like. At the same time, this was happening. Prisoners of war. And then we continue on to the Curtis Act of 1888, or 1898, sorry. And then we have all of the printout information on the Curtis Act. The Dawes Act. And this is a map here of the federal reservations and the state reservations. (1891), a camp of the Lakota Sioux tribe. And at that same time period, a rural pioneer cabin. And a picture along the shores of Lake Michigan, here in Wisconsin. And then here we have Dawes Severalty Act, and it explains how all of our lands were stolen and sold off. Let's just zoom in here a little bit. And then here on the table we have some reading material for those who decide to take a little bit deeper dive into the treaties. You can see number 3 is the Treaty of Fort Laramie, 1851. And these are the actual treaties, or the portions of them that I was able to source. And we can see the signatures on the treaty. And I included the Menominee tribe. Just because I wanted to make sure that we have our connections to Wisconsin. And then we start with Manifest Destiny. And the famous painting that goes along with it. The full printout of the transcript, the editorial that was written, declaring Manifest Destiny of the United States, which led us to the Great Bison Genocide can see what's the difference at the bottom there between bison and buffalo. The beginnings of the railroad and how that contributed to the bison slaughter. And then we'll work our way around to the next side here. We have the beginnings of the literature for the boarding school. This is a partial list of the schools that are identified here in the United States. You can see there's a partial list of them here. This one says 357 schools. There were actually over 400 schools. And then we continue with a map of all of the different tribes. And this is not a complete map, but it was one of the best that I was able to source. And then just to make sure that we can read what was said on the map, we blew that up a little bit. And then we included two more maps. We've got this one here and this one here, which shows the original range of the American bison. And if we really look, they covered 2/3 of the United States, the northeast portion of Mexico, and a good portion of Canada at one time. And as colonists forced their way west, we can see the different changes in color as the bison herds were pushed further west and their population was eroded. Let's see here. There's the map key for everybody. And then we have a peek of what the bison looked like before all of that started. And then we're going to take a peek here into the other folder. It's a bison timeline, and we start in the 1500s, and it takes us through the whole story of our bison and the decimation of their population all the way until (2016). Naming the bison as the national mammal. And with the near extinction of the food supply and the forced reservations brought the boarding schools. This was the photo that my husband saw at the library, where he said that he thought he looked more distinguished in his native regalia with his long hair, and I have to agree. And some before and after here of the same family. And another before and after down here. And as I walk through this display with anybody, one of the things that I like to point out in these before and after photos of all of these children is the difference in their skin tone. Let's go back and look at this one again. Because every time I see it, it makes me think of what horrors had to have been inflicted to change somebody's skin tone that drastically in such a short period of time. Light deprivation, malnutrition, skin bleaching. All of these things were employed against these children because brown skin was considered dirty. And then we have my trip to the library in Manitowoc and how they presented all of this information. An example of an indigenous display and how they presented this information. And while I don't have the props that they've got at the museums and the library, I had the internet. Here we come to the Carlisle School. a more famous picture up above. And then I blew up a section of that picture so that we could actually just look at the faces of the children. Because of all of the stories that I could tell about what happened at that school, those faces, they say more than anybody could ever say. Jesuit priests. Hampton Boarding School in 1897. St. Patrick's Boarding School in Oklahoma in the early 1900s. And I included this photo because I hear a lot of people talk about how this was so necessary because the Native children were starving and uneducated and hungry and hopeless, and this was all meant to save and spare them. Do these children look like they were starving? That's before the atrocities at the school. Now let's look at the children again after. And then, of course, one of the Indian school cemeteries. And again, a reference to Wisconsin. This is a school right here.